Hey guys, sorry I couldn't be there today, but I know that you guys are in great hands with Miss Ryan and or Miss Tidwell. So make sure you listen closely. I'm going to go over the bell work and then I'm going to go on to the notes page. So starting with the bell work. So first question on the bell work says solve for x. X minus 9 equals 12. Remember that when we're solving an equation, we always want to get x by itself. And to do that, we're going to do the opposite of the operation that's happening. So since this is minus 9, we're going to say plus 9 to both sides. And so x equals 12 plus 9, which is 21. So that's what we should have gotten for number 1. Moving on to number 2. Now, this one was a little more tricky because this has an x over here. This x actually has a negative in front of it or a minus sign, so that sticks with that x. So if we want to get rid of this 15, right now is it a positive 15 or a negative 15? You're right now it's a positive 15. So I need to subtract 15 from both sides. 3 minus 15 is negative 12, so don't forget that there's a negative on this x. So negative x equals negative 12. So since negative x equals negative 12, I divide both sides by negative 1 because there's an understood 1 in front of this x. So x equals positive 12. So be very careful there. That's a very common mistake, that because this is positive 15, we need to subtract 15. And then when I have this negative x left over, I need to divide by negative 1. Don't forget either of those things. Okay, now my last equation down here has variables on both sides. Remember, when we have variables on both sides, we need to draw my river, and I need to move my x's to one side and my numbers to the other. It does not matter whether you move the x's to the left or the right. You could go either way. I'm going to move my x's to the left, so I'm going to add 6x on this side to make that go away. I'm going to add 6x on this side, so I'm left with 24 plus 3x and 6x is 9x equals 15. Now I have a two-step equation. I'm trying to get x by itself, so I subtract 24. So I have 9x equals 15 minus 24, which should give me 9. Oh, negative 9. And so then I divide by 9 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 1. And on all of these equations, remember, you could check it by subbing it back in. Saying 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So 24 minus 3 is 21. Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6. And 15 plus 6 is 21. So because negative 1 works for both sides, this is a true equation. Okay, continuing on. Last question on the bell work said give 3 ways to reason that angles 1 and 7 are congruent. So this was a select all that apply. So we can take each one of these. So let's first mark angles 1 and 7. And we can use our notes from Friday to help us with this. So angles 1 and 7 are alternate interior angles. They are congruent because P and Q are parallel. So thus they are congruent because P and Q are parallel. So if 1 and 7 are alternate interior, these would be my parallel lines. These are inside the parallel lines, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So that's true. They are alternate interior angles. Okay. The next statement says angles 1 and 5 are congruent because they are corresponding angles. So we're tracking the reasoning here. 1 and 5 are corresponding. That's true. So that part's true. Angles 5 and 7 are vertical angles. This one and this one. That's true. They're vertical. They share that vertex. Thus, angles 1 and 7 must be congruent. So if 1 is congruent to 5, and 5 is congruent to 7, then we could eliminate that 5 and say 1 is congruent to 7. The second statement is true as well. Okay, third statement. Angles 2 and 8 are alternate interior angles. Let's look, 2 and 8. That's true. Angles 2 and 8 are alternate interior angles. Thus, they are congruent because P and Q are parallel. That's true. Thus, 1 and 7 are supplementary to 2 and 8. Therefore, 1 and 7 are congruent. So 1 is supplementary to 2, and 7 is supplementary to 8. Well, if 2 is congruent to 8, then 1 and 7 must be the same. For example, that one's a little bit tricky, so let's get an example on that one. So say 2 was 60 degrees. Then that would mean 8 is 60 degrees. Well, if both of these are 60 degrees, there's only one number that you can add to 60 degrees to get to 180, and that would be 120. So angles 1 and 7 both must be 120. So this one's true as well. Angles 1 and 7 are complementary angles, and complementary angles must be congruent. So nothing about this statement is true. 1 and 7 aren't complementary, and complementary angles do not have to be congruent. So that one's incorrect. Angles 1 and 7 are not congruent. Well, that's not true because we just proved they are congruent 3 ways. Angles 1 and 7 are alternate exterior angles. That's not true because they're between the parallel lines. They're inside. And they're congruent because P and Q are parallel. P and Q are parallel, but they are not alternate exterior angles. So that is not a true statement either. So if you do not already have the notes page, then be sure to have whoever's in charge of the video pause here so you can get the notes page, and we're about to roll into notes. Okay, so today's essential question is, how can you determine the value for x by identifying the relationship between angles? All right, so you should have your note sheet by now, so let's fill in some vocabulary. So we learned Friday that parallel lines are two lines that never touch and have the same, and we're going to change where it says angle measure to slope, and have the same slope. Okay, a transversal, we also learned this word last week, is a type of line that cuts through a set of two or more lines. So remember, we have parallel lines, that's the lines that never intersect, and a transversal is a type of line that cuts through a set of two or more lines. There are 3 ways to name an angle. So this is just kind of coming back to how we know which angle it's talking about. So you can name it by 3 letters. And with 3 letters, the vertex is in the middle. Okay? You can name it by its vertex with a letter. And you can name it by a number. So let's look at an example of that real quick. So if I had this angle right here, and there was an A, a B, and a C right here, and I'm just going to put a 1 right here. So given this angle, with 3 letters, I could call it 2 things. I could either call it angle ABC, or I could call it angle CBA, because I could either say ABC or CBA. So either one of those would work for the 3 letters portion. Okay, now if I were to use just the vertex, there's only one way I could say that with a letter. And the vertex is this one right here, this letter, this point right here, so that would just be angle B. And then with a number, that would be angle 1. Okay, moving right along. The diagram shows lines L, M, N, P, and Q all cut by a transversal T. Which two lines are parallel, and how do you know? So remember, if lines are parallel, then when they're cut, slide this up, then when they're cut by that transversal, they have the same slope, so they make the same angle measures, okay? It cuts it and provides the same measures. So the lines that are parallel here, we're going to look at. So I know that it can't be P and Q, okay? There's no way they're parallel because they're facing each other. It looks like it might be M and P or L and P. Now, let's compare a few things. I know that this angle is labeled 60. If this is 60, then what's on this side? Right, so this angle is 120 degrees. This angle is also 120 degrees. But let's go down here. So if I'm talking about this angle, its corresponding angle should be here. Okay, this one is not parallel to this one. Let's look at this one. So this is 120, 110, 100. There's no way that any of these three lines are parallel to each other. But this one is 120 and this one is 120, and they're both slanted down. So line L is parallel to line P. We could write that as line L is parallel, those symbols mean parallel, to line P. Okay? And we know because corresponding angles are congruent. Okay? Line L is parallel to line P because of these two. Now this one down here is 120 degrees, but its corresponding angle, what should be its corresponding angle, is 60. This is below the line, not above the line like these two are. Moving along. Example 2 says, what is the value of x for the parallel lines and transversals shown? So these angles right here are labeled here and here. Now, remember Friday, we looked at all of the different types of angles. Right here, this angle matches up to this angle. It's in the corresponding position because it's to the right of the parallel line on top of the transversal. So the same way as you sitting at a table are in the same location as someone else at a different table, you are in a corresponding position. These angles are also in a corresponding position. Now, if we look back at our notes page from Friday, under corresponding, we wrote congruent. So that means that this angle is congruent to this angle. So angle B is congruent to angle C. Okay, so angle B is congruent to angle C. Just a fact that I noticed, because this B right here is congruent to angle C. Now, we might need to get a little more specific than that because I could be talking about this is angle B, this is angle B, this is angle B. We can get more specific by saying angle ABC is congruent to angle DCE. Well, if angle ABC is congruent to DCE, then that must mean that the measure of angle ABC is equal to the measure of angle DCE. Well, the measure of angle ABC is 4x plus 22. And the measure of angle DCE is 5x. So these two must be equal since these are congruent angles. So now that we've set that up, I have to solve this equation. Remember, I have to get the x's to one side and the numbers to the other. Because this is already almost by itself, because there's no number out here, I'm going to move this 4x over to the other side by saying minus 4x minus 4x. So I'm left with 22 equals 5x minus 4x is 1x, so x equals 22. That does not mean that these measures are 22. It just means that x is 22. Now, if it asked us for the measures, we would have to take this x value and put it back into the equation, like example 3. So example 3 says, what is the measure of angle DCE? Now remember, angle DCE measured 5x, and we just figured out right here that x was equal to 22. So 5x would mean 5 times 22, which would be 110 degrees. So the measure of angle DCE is 110 degrees. All this little m right here means is the measure of angle DCE. Okay, then it asks, what is the measure of angle GBC? GBC. Now, you might say, why would they ask for angle GBC? We don't even know what that is. There's nothing there labeling that one. So let's reason through this a little bit. So, if angle DCE is 110, then what is angle, so let me label this as 110 since we now know that's what it is. What is the measure of angle FCE? How are these two angles related? Hopefully you said they're supplementary because they make a straight line right here. So if this is 110, then this must be 70. Well, if this is 70, how is angle FCE related to angle GBC? Hopefully you said they're corresponding. So since they're corresponding, if this is 70, what should this be? You're right, it should be 70 as well. So the measure of angle GBC is 70 degrees. Okay? All right, so these were meant for whiteboard practice, but I want you to have exposure to them. So really, you just need to be paying attention right now. If you want to sketch something on the back of your notes page, that would be just fine. So what is the measure of angle A? So this is angle A right here. What is the measure of angle A? Okay, you're right, it's 55 degrees. And the reason is because the one above it is 55 degrees. So it's vertical to the 55 degree angle. All right, so then what is the measure of angle? So if this is 55, what is the measure of angle B? You're right, it's vertical to this one, so it's 65 degrees. And it's vertical to the 65 degree angle. Okay, and then what is the measure of angle C? That's this one right here. Now, this one's going to take a little bit more thought. Okay, I know right here it says that lines L and M are parallel. So these are my parallel lines. If these are my parallel lines, then this and this these two are my transversals. So I really don't need this transversal cutting through for this problem. Okay, this angle is made by this transversal. We'll call it T, and I'll call this one S just for clarity purposes. So transversal T cuts through L and M, which means that these two are alternate interior angles. So if this is 65, then this is 65. Because it's alternate interior to angle B, which means that they are congruent. And then what is the measure of angle F? So angle F is all the way down here. Now, angle F is formed by the transversal with S, which means I'm not even paying attention to line T or anything that's made from that. For angle F, if this is 60, the corresponding angle to this one is here. It's angle F. So this is 60. So it's 60 degrees because it corresponds to the 60 degrees. So it's a corresponding angle to the 60-degree angle. All right? So this one says to solve for x. It says that angle A is 8x plus 6. It's a little light. I'm going to write it so you can see it. And that angle B is 4x plus 38. So if that's true, let's track reasoning a little bit. So if this is 4x plus 38, these two are parallel. I can tell by those little markings right there. That has the same arrows, then they're parallel. So if this is here, the corresponding angle to that is here. So that would be 4x plus 38 as well. Or you could say the corresponding angle to this one is here. So that would be 8x plus 6. Now, I have vertical angles right here. You could do that. You also could have looked straight at these and said these are on the outside of the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So we can go ahead and answer question number 3. They are alternate exterior angles because they're outside of the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. But we also could kind of reason through to get vertical angles that you guys are more confident in. So I could take these, they're equal to each other. So I set up my equation right here. I'm going to say 4x plus 38 equals 8x plus 6. So then I subtract 6 from both sides. And I'm left with 4x plus 32 equals 8x. I subtract 4x from both sides. And I'm left with 32 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4. And I'm left with x equals 8. So to answer the first question, x is equal to 8. Then it says, what is the measure for angle A and B? Well, I know if I find one of them, they're equivalent. So angle A is equal to angle B. So I can take that 8 and put it into either one. I'm going to put it into this one. So that gives me 8 times 8 plus 6. So 8 times 8 is 64. Plus 6 would give me 70 degrees. I could check it just to make sure that 8 is correct by putting it in this one. 4 times, let's take this one. 4 times 8 is 32. Plus 38 gives me 70 degrees as well. So they're both 70 degrees. We have them congruent. All right, and we already answered the last question that they are alternate exterior angles. All right, 2 more would-be whiteboard practice if I was there problems. So I'm going to clarify this one for you a little bit. It's a little fuzzy. Let's zoom in. Okay, so this one says that A is 8x plus 74 and that B is 2x plus 56. Now, right now they are on the same side of the transversal between the parallel lines. So I know this is the last question, but I think it's really important for us to notice that these are consecutive interior or same side interior angles. So same side slash consecutive. That was our other way of saying that. Interior. They're inside the parallel lines. So same side or consecutive interior. Well, if they're same side or consecutive interior, we know that they are supplementary. Okay? They're supplementary angles. They add up to be 180. So when I'm solving for x, I have to add them up to equal 180. So I'm going to do that right up here. Let me get a little space. So I'm going to say 8x plus 74 plus 2x plus 56 should equal 180 degrees because same side or consecutive interior angles equal 180. So 8x and 2x is 10x. 74 and 56 is 130. Okay, you could add 6 plus 4, get the 10, carry the 1. 8 plus 5 is 13. Equals 180. Subtract 130 from both sides. So 10x equals 50. Divide both sides by 10. And so x equals 5. So that's the value of x. But remember, to find the value of the angles, I have to sub the 5 back into each of these. Now remember, these are not going to be equivalent because they are supplementary. So I actually have to sub it into each one to find that measure. Or once I get 1, I can subtract it from 180. So I take the 5, I say 8 times 5 plus 74. So 8 times 5 is 40 plus 74. So that would give me 114. So the measure of angle A is 114. And then I could sub the 5 into this one. 2 times 5 plus 56. So that's 10 plus 56 is 66 degrees. And then if I added those, they should give me 180. That's just kind of another fail-safe for you to be sure that you have it correct. So one more whiteboard problem, I think. Oh, 2 more. But we'll do this, and then you'll have your exit ticket and then homework. So solve for x. So first of all, how are these angles related? Okay, they're corresponding angles because they're in the same position relative to the parallel lines and the transversals. They're on top of the parallel lines to the left of the transversal. So when I'm solving for x, these should be equal to each other because angle A is equal to angle B. So 6x plus 12 equals 3x plus 63. So I subtract 3x from both sides. Remember, I'm solving an equation with variables on both sides, which means that I have to get my x's on one side and my numbers on the other. So I subtract 3x, 6x minus 3x is 3x plus 12 equals 63. I subtract 12 from both sides. So 3x equals 51. Divide both sides by 3. And so 51 divided by 3 gives me, I think, 17. Let me be sure. 51 divided by 3 is, in fact, 17. So x equals 17. So that's my first question. Now I have to find the measure of angles A and B. Now, A and B are congruent, which means I only have to put the 17 in one of them. So I'm going to take this one. So 3 times 17 plus 63. So 3 times 17 gives me 51, what I just did over here, plus 63 should give me 114 degrees. Now, I could always go back and check my other one because 6 times 17 plus 12 should give me the same thing. 6 times 17 is going to be 102. So then 102 plus 12 should also give me 114. So because this is equal to this, I know that I have the correct value for x because there's only one number that would make that true. Let's move on to our last question, so you'll still have plenty of time for the exit ticket. So for this one, solve for x. This one is a little more tricky. Now, I know that this transversal or piece of a transversal here honestly doesn't even matter, Okay, it's really just kind of a distractor because this angle is made up by this parallel line and this transversal. This angle is made up by the other parallel line and the transversal. These are alternate exterior angles. Okay, because they're alternate exterior angles, I know that they are congruent. So I could say -5 plus 10x has to equal 9x plus 1. So then as I'm solving it, oops, sorry, I thought you could see that. I subtract 9x from both sides. As you can see, I like to get my x's on the left. You don't have to do that. However you want to move your x's around is fine. I'm going to bring that -5 down. 10 minus 9 is 1. So I'm going to say plus 1x equals, that went away, 1. I add 5 to both sides. So 1x, or just x, equals 6. So now that I have that, I can sub it into one of my angles because they both measure the same. I can say 9 times 6 plus 1. 9 times 6 is 54, plus 1 is 55. I can still check, even though I know it's going to be the same, and say -5 plus 6, or plus 10 times 6, so -5 plus 60 is also 55. So both angles measure 55 degrees, and we already said that they are alternate exterior angles. So now what you need to do is you need to go to Schoology and do your exit ticket. And then if you still have extra time, you can go ahead and do the homework on Schoology as well. Note, if you want to take the retake Unit 8 Transformations test, I need you to set up a time with me to come do that. So you can shoot me an email, come talk to me tomorrow when I'm back at school, and we will get that set up. Otherwise, make sure you do your homework, do what is asked of you today, be good. I want a good report when I get back tomorrow. Have a great day.